Hello, and welcome to today's story. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more. The story you're about to hear is based on accounts and rumors. Its full truth can't be confirmed. Now sit back, relax, and let's dive right in. I don't know if this belongs here, but I need it somewhere outside my head. Maybe that means here. Maybe that means you. 3 weeks ago, I answered a flyer tacked up on a corkboard between a lost cat notice and a yoga class. $500 per night for a short-term sleep study. 3 nights. Transportation reimbursed. Must be willing to wear monitoring equipment. Must not have a history of parasomnia. I had 3 past due notices on my kitchen table, and a landlord who'd started texting me at 6 a.m. like I owed him the dawn. I'm not proud of the math I did in my head. How much food $1,500 buys. How many days of quiet it buys from people who suddenly remember your name when your account runs low. But I did it anyway. I called the number. A woman with a level professional voice gave me an address I didn't recognize and told me to come after sunset. The clinic sat in a business park off the highway, where everything looks like it could be rented by the hour. Anonymous glass facades, blank signs, a single strip of sodium streetlight, washing everything colorless. Inside, the air smelled like alcohol swabs in the inside of a freezer. Fluorescents buzzed in long, stupid rows overhead. The hallways were bright and too white and went on forever. I kept expecting the receptionist to ask me to sign in. Instead, she slid me a clip-on badge and a clipboard with questions so basic they made me feel like I was trying to trick someone by answering honestly. Do you sleepwalk? Number, do you experience night terrors? Not since I was a kid. Do you dream? Yes. Do you remember them sometimes? She took the clipboard without looking at it, without looking at me, and said, "Follow the green line." There was a green stripe on the floor, barely darker than the tile, that led down one of the halls. We passed doors with heavy metal plates where the handles should have been. Some were labeled A1, A2, B3, but most were just blank. Some had card readers next to them, little red LEDs sleeping in their plastic boxes. Some had old tape residue in the shape of where a sign used to be. At the end of the hall, a nurse met me. Her smile was sharp and mathematically correct. She had a cart full of electrodes and paste and a tangle of wires like someone had pulled the veins out of an electronic animal. "We'll be monitoring you throughout the night," she said, which would have been reassuring if the place didn't already feel like it didn't have corners, like I would never find the end of anything if I started walking. They put me in a small room with too much light and a camera in each corner. The bed was narrow and institutional and made with that impossible flatness that makes you feel rude for lying down. There was a single high window that showed a slice of night sky the color of tap water. The nurse spread cold paste against my temples and pressed electrodes into it one by one. She taped a pulse oximeter to my finger. She wrapped a belt around my chest to measure breathing and stretched a cap over my hair, threaded with tiny sensors that made me feel like a studied beetle. When she was done, a man in a white coat stepped in, scrolled a few screens on a tablet, and said, without looking up, "Try to sleep as you normally would." "As I normally would," I repeated, like maybe if I said it, it would be possible in a room where the corners had cameras. He lowered the lights, but they never went off. They dimmed to a hospital gray, so the cameras would still see me. I lay on my side and watched the little red record light blink. I told myself all kinds of reasonable lies, that it was a real study, that the money would hit my account, that the worst thing that could happen was embarrassment if I drooled. I slept. I woke to the nurse unpeeling sensors with gentle efficiency. The lights were up again. The window had a rectangle of flat white morning pressed into it, like someone had taped the sky in place. I felt heavy, not in a bad way, like concrete that had finally set. For the first time in months, I'd sleepwalken without a headache. "How'd I do?" I asked the nurse. It felt like a normal question, and she didn't answer. The man with the tablet popped his head in, said, "Vitals were consistent," and vanished almost as fast. The nurse handed me a plastic cup with orange juice that tasted like all oranges had been removed from it, and a muffin that had never been warm. They told me to come back that night. On the way out, the green line on the floor seemed longer than I remembered. The buzzing was louder. The second night, the nurse's hands shook. I noticed because the paste smudged cold against my hairline and dribbled down my ear. "Sorry," she said, and then nothing else. The man with the tablet had a second man with him. They both smelled faintly like dust, like they'd been somewhere the janitor couldn't access. I tried a joke, nothing clever, so no picking my nose on camera, right? And watched both of their faces do nothing in return, like they'd heard a word in a language that didn't map to anything they knew. "Anything I should know?" I asked, as the nurse tightened the chest belt a notch too snug. The second man looked at the first. He looked at the floor. "You didn't," he said, too soft. "I didn't what?" He pretended he hadn't spoken. When they left, they used a key card on my door that chirped twice. I hadn't noticed the card reader before, or maybe I'd noticed and my brain fitted it into the category of things that were not my responsibility. The sound of the lock engaging felt like a polite threat. I tried to sleep as I normally would. The hallways came first. In my dream, I was standing on cold tile, barefoot with a hospital gown brushing the backs of my calves. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed like fluorescent lights do, a sound you only notice when a second sound is trying to hide in it. The halls were white and too bright, but I could feel darkness pooled around the edges of everything, like negative space you could touch. I walked. Every door was a door with no handle. Some sat closed in their frames with the quiet of a sleeping animal. Some were off by a fraction, just a skein of shadow in the crack. Some had numbers that didn't count up or down, but reset, like a clock with a broken memory. A 1, a 2, a 2, 2, a 3, B7, B7. The floor had faint dust in the edges where mop heads never quite reach. My name whispered behind me like a nurse practicing saying it without wanting to be heard. Then in front of me, like a PA system turned down too low, my name. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, and I turned too fast, and the gown breathed cool air across my knees, and I kept walking. I tried the doors that didn't have handles because a part of me was a child again, and thought touching something was enough to make it yield. The metal was cold. Something on the other side leaned back with equal pressure, not opening, not pushing me away, just letting me know that it knew I was there. When I woke, my mouth was dry, and I had a taste like I'd been breathing old air. The lights were bright. The nurse was there. The camera light blinked. It took me an extra second to register the thin gray line across the soles of my feet. At first I thought it was the sheets. Then I scanned the floor and saw the faint outline of my own size in dust prints. A fine powder on the tile, disturbed and imperfect, as if the sole of my foot had skimmed it and lifted most, not all, away. For a deranged second, I wondered if they sprinkled it there to dramatize results, like the powder crime scene techs used to make fingerprints appear. Then the nurse followed my eyes, and her face did something small and tight. "We'll get housekeeping in here," she said. She wiped my feet with a wet towel, quick, like erasing. "How did I sleep?" I asked, because it was a script by then. The nurse swallowed. The man with the tablet didn't look at me. The second man wasn't there. "You didn't," someone said from the hall. Maybe it was the same man. Maybe it was a recording laid over the air. The green line back to the lobby had doubled somehow, like a hallway you walk down in a dream that keeps unrolling in front of you. No matter how many steps you take, I should have walked out. I should have gone home and blocked the number and told myself the universe was trying to pay me to quit while I was ahead. Instead, I nodded at the receptionist like I was a regular somewhere and told them I'd be back for night 3. It was after sunset again when I returned. There weren't any cars in the lot except mine and a white van that could have belonged to a florist or a hostage taker. Inside, the clinic smelled more like metal and less like citrus. The lights seemed to buzz at a frequency closer to my teeth. The nurse didn't meet my eyes. Someone had replaced her with a different nurse who had the same face arranged in a different order. Her name tag was reversed so I couldn't see her name. She didn't fix it. The cap they stretched over my hair felt tighter. The belt around my chest made me exhale all the way to clip it, like they were measuring how small they could make me. Before they dropped the room to the research gray dim, 2 researchers came in. The man with the tablet and a woman I hadn't seen before. She had a badge without a picture and eyes like a closed hallway. "Do you remember walking into the other room last night?" she asked. It was the way she said remember that made my scalp crawl. Like memory and imagination were adjacent rooms you could slide a file between. "I didn't leave the bed," I said. "Your door locks. I heard it twice." The man with the tablet flicked his thumb. The woman watched my face like she was waiting for a facial tic she could name. "May we show you something?" she asked, already wheeling in a monitor on a metal cart whose wheels squealed in 4 minor keys. The screen showed my room from a corner angle. There I was, ridiculous bald-looking cap on my head, wires splayed like a low-rent jellyfish, sleeping. The timestamp rolled. I slept. The lights buzzed. The little red record light blinked like a heartbeat with a job to do. At 2:13 and 9 seconds, I sat up. I watched my sleep self rise with the slow deliberation of someone trying not to wake the person they are. I peeled the electrodes from my temples with a clean practicedness my awake hands do not possess. I slipped the belt up over my chest. I stood. I walked to the door. The cap stayed on my head like it was part of me. The door unlocked without the chirp I'd come to expect. The red LED stayed red. The door swung open. My double, stepped into the hall without looking back. The camera showed an empty bed. The timestamp rolled. The man with the tablet watched me instead of the screen. "Where did I go?" I asked, though I heard the past tense arrangement of the sentence and heard what I had confessed. The feed jumped to a hallway camera, one I didn't know existed but of course did. The green line marched along the floor like an artery. My hospital gown blurred white against the white. I walked with purpose. The camera switched to the next, then the next, as if the building had already mapped the route. The hall ended in a heavy door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" in white letters rubbed almost colorless. No handle. Just the red, sleeping eye of a card reader. My double didn't slow. The door opened. No chirp, no card, just a motion like someone inside had put their shoulder against it and decided they wanted me. The feed cut to static. The woman folded her arms. "Later," she said, the way someone says the word they use when they need 10 minutes to decide how much to lie. "You returned." They scrabbled forward on the video. The empty bed, the timestamp crawling like an insect. The door, a different angle, opening onto a dark hall. My double returned, slower. It headed straight for the bed like water seeking low ground. And then, with a steadiness I don't recognize, and a familiarity that makes me sick to remember, it climbed onto the bed where I already was. I was in the bed, and I was not. I was asleep, and I sat down. On the screen, the two of me overlapped with a glitching seam, like the image had been recorded one frame off, like the camera couldn't decide which of us was the object and which was the shadow. For half a second, the picture buckled. The red record light strobed, and the sound, there was no sound, but I heard it anyway, went thin and far away, like an airplane overhead that never arrives. The woman turned the monitor off, and I said something, maybe a swear, maybe a joke, because that is what I do when my brain loses traction. The man with the tablet smiled without showing teeth, which is another way of not smiling at all. "What is behind that door?" I asked. "Storage," the woman said. "Off limits." "For what?" "Your safety." She reached for the wall dimmer like I might bolt. "Try to sleep as you normally would." When the light fell, it didn't feel like dark. It felt like a hand over my eyes. The chest belt made each breath an argument. I lay still until my heartbeat counted itself down from sprint to jog to walk. Somewhere beyond my room, something clicked in a rhythm that might have been intentional and might have been in my head. The red record light blinked. The camera watched. I kept my eyes open until the idea of keeping them open became louder. Then the sounds themselves, I closed them. Dreams arrived in the way a train does, whether you are ready for it or not. The hallway again, bare feet. The hush of the air vents making peace with the buzz of the fluorescents. Doors with no handles, just that serious, faintly oily sheen of metal that's been touched by hands and then cleaned over and over until it forgets that it is a door. My name, no longer whispering, but said like attendance. Present. My name. Behind me. My name in front of me. My name from the ceiling, from the floor, from inside the walls of doors with no handles. I tried to turn left. The hallway unrolled right. I tried to stop. The floor sloped forward. It wasn't an invisible hand pulling me so much as the removal of options, like someone had drawn a maze with a ruler and erased all the wrong turns. I saw the authorized personnel only door from a distance I couldn't quantify, and it looked flat until I got close enough to see the tiny scuffs around its frame where things had gone in and out that were not doors. I had the thought, cool and useless, that if I pressed my ear to it, I would hear myself on the other side. My foot touched the dust. It lifted in a fine cloud that didn't behave like air or powder, but like a thin skin over water. I looked down to find my toes outlined in gray, like chalk around a body. When I looked up, the door opened with the same logic as a blink. Inside was not a room. Inside was a narrower hall with a lower ceiling, and the light belonged to it, not to me. It threw my shadow ahead like bait. The walls were not white. They were painted that same sad off-white you get when you try to paint over a stain, and the stain remembers. It smelled like metal and old linens, and the static you feel when you pull a sweater over your head too fast. There were doors here, too, no handles. Thin windows at eye level with the blinds drawn on the other side. On some, the blinds rippled inward like a breath. On some, I saw nothing but the slick of glass. On one, I saw my own reflection in the window, distorted by the angle, wide at the cheekbones and thin at the mouth. Its lips moved a fraction before mine did. They said my name as if reminding me. Somewhere behind me, something walked. Bare. Slow? A drag in the step like the dust had weight. I don't remember deciding to run. I remember the way a hospital gown betrays you when you try to move too fast in it. I remember the brief, sick humiliation of being afraid in a place where people wear extremely comfortable shoes. I shoved at a door without a handle and felt it flex, just a little, like a muscle that could decide to let me in if it chose. The walk behind me got closer. I could feel the hot, damp presence of someone else's breath against the back of my neck. It smelled like air filtered past the same lungs twice. I turned around because there was no version of me I could live with that didn't, and saw myself at the far end of the hall, turning to look over his shoulder like I had. Same motion, mirror stopped. Our eyes met across the worst light, and he smiled, a practiced smile I didn't remember practicing. It felt like someone else had been using my mouth for something mine hadn't been built for. Then the lights went out the way a thought goes out, which is to say, not all at once, but piece by piece, like an argument losing its logic. I woke to the red record light stuttering. The camera had stopped being a presence and started being an eye. The door of my room shuddered in its frame. The card reader glowed a patient red. I could hear someone outside breathing. That is how quiet the room had become. And then the click that meant the card had been used. The lock was a throat swallowing. The door opened. I never thought of myself as brave until I realized my first instinct was to go very still. My mother used to scold the dog for playing dead when it was time to have its nails clipped. I finally understood the appeal. The thing that entered had my shape and my little ridiculous cap and the end of shift slump in its shoulders. It kept its eyes down as if not to spook me. It stepped in something on the tile that left a print when it lifted its foot. A neat gray oval of dust. It didn't look at me. It looked at the bed. It climbed. If you've never watched your own weight dim the mattress you are already occupying, it is hard to explain the specific nausea that arrives. It's not like looking at a photo of yourself. It's like watching an empty field disclose a mine. The gap between us narrowed, shorter than an exhale, shorter than a thought. "Stop," I said, a stupid word with no leverage. The copy didn't stop. It lowered itself, not on top of me so much as into. The hospital cap brushed my cheek. The smell off its gown matched mine. Its skin felt ambient cold. Not dead cold, like it had spent a long time in a hallway where the temperature was nobody's priority. I put my hands up. They slid through its shoulders with a resistance like heavy fog. For a second, our arms intersected, and then the geometry failed or succeeded. How do you calculate something that wasn't supposed to be possible? And I felt an ache open under my ribs, the way pressure equalizes when a plane door closes. Not pain, a sudden rearranging. My heart stumbled. There was a ringing sound so soft I might have imagined it, a tone my ears had forgotten they could reproduce. Then we were one thing, then we were two, then one. The last image I have is my own face, an inch from mine. Eyes black in that way eyes are when they're just reflecting the worst light back to you. My lips parted. I didn't know which mouth did it. We breathed together, or I breathed twice. Dark. I woke in my apartment with my phone face up on the bedside table and a notification I didn't remember setting. Plus $1,500 deposited. There was a folded brochure under the phone I hadn't seen before. I didn't rate it. I went to the shower and turned the water so hot it made my skin smart. A streak of gray spiraled down the drain, the exact color of the dust that collects behind janitor carts and under rolling beds and in the corners of rooms where corners don't happen anymore. It took 3 days for my breathing to stop sounding like someone else's. It took 2 before I noticed the mirror. You can test this yourself. Raise your right hand and watch your reflection raise its left. There's a lag you never notice unless you ask it to be there. A sync your brain does automatically. A forgiveness built into the way we accept ourselves. On the second day, my reflection forgot to forgive me. My hand moved, its hand moved, 1 heartbeat late. I told myself it was lack of sleep. I told myself I'd slept so well, I didn't know how to do it anymore. I told myself anything that would let me leave the bathroom. The next night I woke with my mouth full of the taste of air that had already been used. I turned on every light in the apartment and counted to 100 with my hand on my chest to feel each number land. My phone buzzed. I flinched. It was a calendar reminder from the clinic I hadn't scheduled. Follow-up interview optional. The address was the same as before. The time said after sunset. I deleted it. It reappeared. I threw the phone into a drawer and slept on the couch with the TV muttering infomercials at me like people in a brightly lit cult. If the story ended there, I'd worry I was the kind of narrator who manufactures dread, because it's easier than admitting I made a bad decision for money. It doesn't end there. On the fourth day, I went to put on shoes and found a neat train of dust ovals leading from my bed to the front door. On the fifth day, the dust trail returned from the door to the bed. I do not own gray dust. I do not live near a construction site. I do not have a cat. On the sixth, I woke to the sound of my front door unlocking. There is nothing in that sentence that it is possible to understate. I keep a cheap deadbolt. It clicked back like a mouth letting something out. I lay very still, because apparently that is who I am now, and watched my bedroom door open a fraction. The darkness on the other side felt thoughtful. I said my name out loud to prove to the room that the voice the room had been using did not belong to it. The darkness said my name back one heartbeat late. Sometimes a delay is the difference between an echo and an answer. I didn't go back to the clinic. I didn't answer their calls. The deposit cleared. On the seventh day, my reflection and I both raised our hands at the same time. No lag, like a signal had finally synced. I laughed, a sharp, ugly sound, because it felt like winning a game I hadn't agreed to play. Then my reflection smiled, a fraction too long, a fraction too wide, as if it were waiting for me to catch up. I don't write this to warn you off paid studies. I write this because there is a rectangle of dust on my floor tonight in the shape of a doormat that isn't there. I write this because I keep waking just as I am sitting up. Because my door locks chirp twice now when I turn the deadbolt, and I cannot tell if the second chirp is the bolt sliding or a card reader swallowing a card that doesn't exist. Because sometimes, right as I drift, I feel a weight lower itself onto the bed, careful as a nurse, practiced as an old habit, because the cap they put on my head left faint grid lines on my scalp that still sting as if the sensors were teeth. Because sometimes I see myself cross the room for water, slow, careful not to spill, and when I return, I am already there, breathing in the dark, waiting for me to lie down so I can. And if anyone here knows what happens behind doors with no handles, don't tell me. If anyone knows what it means to be a person who walks into a wing they are not authorized to enter, do not say it out loud. I am trying very hard to sleep as I normally would. I am trying very hard to be the one who came back. Thanks for listening. I really enjoyed putting this story together for you. If you liked it, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories, and share it with someone who's into this kind of stuff. See you next time.